Today, we sort through the wreckage of Donald Trump's Bull-DOGE-er. This is America Dissected. I'm your host, Dr. Abdul
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Katelyn Jetelina.
And we're recording this on Tuesday, April 1st at 5 p.m. Eastern. So it's been almost 7 weeks now since RFK Jr. was sworn in to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. And wow, what a 7 weeks it's been. Katelyn, how are you feeling right about now?
Today, April 1st, I'm feeling terrible. It has been an absolute bloodbath for federal workers today. We all knew this was coming. It's just the stories we're hearing. People showed up to work and found out they were fired because their security badge wasn't working. 12 of the top senior leaders are gone. They're actually reassigned, which is basically firing without firing. And thousands and thousands of people that protect our health every day are gone. I'm having a hard time even putting it to words because today's been, it's so heartbreaking to see what's happening to our field. And so you're right. It's been a whole 7 weeks of this. It's going to be more, but right now I'm just feeling shitty. How about you, Abdul?
To Katelyn's point, today 10,000 people came to work to do the thing they've done at work almost every day since they started working for our federal government, which is to figure out how to make Americans healthier and safer in the most efficient and effective way possible, using science to do that work. And they found out in the most brutal way possible that their government didn't want them there to do that work anymore. And I think as a taxpayer, right, as someone who wants my government to be doing more of this rather than bombing people on a Signal chat, it is deeply frustrating to me. And as someone who's dedicated my life, as I know you have yours, Katelyn, to the work of public health, this is a really devastating thing. These are really good people who deserve a lot better than to be fired en masse like this for just showing up and doing their work. I want to play what RFK Jr. Said about this major restructuring. Take a listen here.
We're going to eliminate an entire alphabet soup of departments and agencies while preserving their core functions by merging them into a new organization called the Administration for a Healthy America, or AHA. We have two goals. The first is obvious, to save the taxpayer money by making our department more efficient. And the second is to radically improve our quality of service.
So RFK is going to promote AHA to address the alphabet soup. It's one thing to think based on some logic and some understanding of how government works, that government can be more efficient. And look, I will be the first to say that is true. It's another entirely never to take the time to actually understand what government does or what the whole arm of government that you operate is doing day to day to make people healthier, and then to say that you're going to eliminate it because somehow you're going to make things more effective and efficient. And Katelyn, I want to ask you this, right? Like, is it possible to improve quality of service by cutting 25% of your workforce right off the top? Is that like a thing you can see happening?
No, I can't. I honestly can't. I agree with you, right? I spent the last couple of years inside CDC pushing for change, pushing for more efficiency, fighting for innovation, better systems, clear communication. And, I think reimagining public health is absolutely essential, but tearing it down with no plan to rebuild or even having a vision of what this looks like isn't transformational. And also, you're naming what, he was saying what he's creating. Isn't that basically what CDC is? Is he just copying and pasting?
But this one rhymes with Maha, Katelyn.
I guess so, okay. Different branding.
All right.
I'm sick of all of these false pretenses without actually making movement to actually move the needle for better health of Americans, right? Like, all of this is it's just talk, and it's not making smart investments. If we were making smart investments, these cuts don't make financial sense, right? Public health is about prevention. For every dollar we put into flu vaccines for elderly, $60 are saved, right? So right now we're borrowing from our future selves with a very high interest rate, which is based in dollars, in health, and in lives. And in the meantime, the U.S. is giving a huge gift to huge corporations because this is going to be privatized. And not only that, other companies that take advantage of the moment. What does canceling tobacco center at CDC do? It gives a huge moment for big tobacco to just jump right in. And I do not get what we're doing, Abdul. I'm so heated.
Yeah. What we're doing is we are giving RFK an opportunity to fundamentally scramble the federal government so that he can give cover to his pre-existing ideological notions and point to something that rhymes conveniently with Maha to say that he did really, really important work, and so cuts and guts the capacity for government to operate that it's only a matter of time until corporations are brought in to privatize a lot of the things the federal government used to do, who just so happen to be people who donate to MAGA and their affiliated politicians. Like, that's what they're doing. And just so folks understand, just to sort of dive into what's happening, they're consolidating 28 divisions into 15. They want to cut the regional offices from 10 to 5. And just so you understand, regional offices, there are HHS offices that all oversee, 3 to 5 to 10 states apiece. Now, when you're cutting them by half, what you're saying is one regional office is now going to oversee many, many more states. And you can imagine how many people live in a state, how diverse these states are, how many different local health departments exist in these states. So all of them are just going to get worse service because of it. Now, and then you have this consolidation under the Administration for a Healthy America, which, as you named, is basically what like HHS is supposed to be, just giving it a new name. And it's going to cover a whole lot of different pre-existing offices, everything from Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, to the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, to National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, to HIV, AIDS services, and maternal and child health care. Like, these are huge arms of the federal government that, by the way, do critical stuff. And reorgs are not easy things. Like, we had to fully telegraph and then implement a reorganization at the small local health department that I operate. And it took some time because you want to measure twice and cut once. Here, they're cutting twice and then they're going to come back and measure. And guess what? They're going to find the whole thing wanting. And I worry that that's entirely the point here.
And you're right. I mean, SAMHSA, right, is a really important agency that focuses on mental health and substance abuse. But that too is getting cut. So it's not like, I mean, we're just seeing that last week with the cancellation of more than $12 billion in state grants, which includes services and support for mental health and substance abuse from SAMHSA. And so a lot of this money of urgent health issues is going to be felt at the local level, right? Are you guys feeling it in Michigan, Abdul, yet?
Big time. I literally just got off a phone call earlier this afternoon with our state health department about literally that they're going to be putting unilateral restrictions on funding that we were using, like it's COVID era funding, but it's not like health challenges stopped because COVID has hit its 5-year mark, right? We're actively thinking about H5N1. We're actively thinking about measles response. And this is infrastructure that our department and all of the departments in our state, and frankly, the country, need right now to stay mobilized. And this speaks to a broader failure to understand some of the biggest challenges in health funding. We have always had these boom and bust cycles. The funding always comes $1 short and a day late. And then you use the funding. And then once the emergency that you had that funding for ends, they pull that funding up rather than maintaining and sustaining funding that you can use so that you can meet a moment when it comes. Because, of course, none of us really know when the next big public health challenge is going to come and where it's going to come from. But the other point here, Katelyn, that I think is really important is even if you're not one of the 25% of people who are just getting axed today, you're one of the 75% of people whose jobs just got 33% harder because you just lost, right, a whole quarter of your workforce. And not only that, but like you just watched traumatically as your colleagues came to work, their badges didn't work, and they were just unilaterally asked to leave, or your boss or your boss's boss was just let go, or a whole division that you were a part of now no longer exists, and you got to figure out where you're going to go to work tomorrow and who you're going to be working for. So the devastation when it comes to our federal workforce is profound. And here's the thing about it. We don't know what's coming next. We don't know if this version of HAHA, right, health and health administration, is going to be able to meet that moment. And if it's not, like, I don't know, the last Trump administration wasn't, there are going to be many, many people who suffer the consequences of it. Katelyn, I want to ask you, right? You know the CDC's operations pretty well. They're alone, a third of the top management left. And over at the FDA, their top vaccine official, Dr. Peter Marks, resigned under duress on Friday. He said in a statement, and I quote, "It has become clear that truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies." How do you think about the ethical conflict of working under RFK Jr. now?
I mean, I think it comes back to what you were just saying about the longevity of literally this workforce, right? The only thing holding up the public health system together right now is literally the unwavering workforce commitment with their clear mission of healthier communities. But I am not convinced that this can last much longer. There's a whole lot of moral injury. Just this week, we saw 75% of scientists are considering leaving their jobs and actually going overseas in order to do scientific discovery. It's really hard to see the path forward. And Peter Marks isn't the only one that's having to make this really hard decision of where their red line is, right? A lot of people at CDC right now, even if they made these cuts, right? Even if they are the 66% that's made it so far over these past 60 days, they are going to be asked to do some really hard stuff that don't align with their values. And they're all figuring out what their red lines are right now. And if Peter Marks can find it, if these 12 senior leaders could find it today, if Kevin Griffin, the director of communication, who also cited misinformation and lies coming from Kennedy and resigned last week, there's not going to be a public health workforce. And then what's the plan there, right? What is what is the long game? I don't understand how this is making, one, America first, or two, how it's making us healthier. And I'm very concerned about workforce morale and longevity. And I mean, one thing that we know is coming down the pipeline is vaccine safety, right? We know that HHS is going to reinvestigate the already debunked link between MMR vaccine and autism. And now we're getting clues on who's behind this initiative. Abdul, what can you tell us about this?
Well, it was reported last week that HHS RFK Jr. Chose David Geyer to analyze data from the Future study. He's a super controversial guy. Him and his father repeatedly made claims, of course debunked, that vaccines cause autism. So you're literally asking the fox to guard the henhouse. It's not even like this is just a scientist with no past history on the issue. No, they are literally choosing a guy who, despite all of the evidence, has stuck to this ideological claim. And the research that they've done has been widely discredited. His medical license was even suspended by the state of Maryland. Dr. Rich Besser, who used to run the CDC, called Geyer, I quote, "a deeply irresponsible choice." It's also important to remember that Geyer didn't get this job because, he's just a dude out there. He goes way back when it comes to his relationship with RFK. RFK's credited Geyer and his father as being pioneers in this research. The whole point of science is that everything is supposed to be done transparently. And we've already seen this administration trip up big time when it comes to transparency. Katelyn, what are some of the ways that you can see a research team led by David Geyer trying to fudge or even mess with the data that they see?
I mean, Abdul, if they get a big database and they have all of these variables, it will be very easy for them to try to fudge the numbers and find an association, particularly because of these things called confounders, right? So some of the time when there's an exposure and an outcome, there's other things that may explain that relationship. A lot of the time in public health, we talk about ice cream sales and shark attacks, right? Ice cream sales go up, shark attacks go up. That doesn't mean because we're getting more ice cream, more sharks are attracted to our blood, but it's because it's summertime, right? That time of year is a confounder. And Abdul, both you and I know anyone can lie with numbers. Take pseudoscience or politics, for example. And I think even if they don't say best case scenario, they don't find a link, I still think that gives the public this idea that this is an open-ended question, and it's not. I mean, there's no causal link, and we know that from no link biologically. We know that from 25 epidemiological studies. We know that from genetics now, and there's just no question. So it's a waste of resources, and it's incredibly dangerous. Especially now we know how they're playing their cards, right? They're not doing this in a good faith manner. And I'm very concerned about when those results come out. I think the only thing you and I and everyone else out there can do is going to have to be flooding the system. and being very clear that there is no link, and hope we reach the people that need to hear it the most.
And demand that they very clearly publish the data so it can be analyzed.
Yeah.
Everything that they collect, right? Keep it open source. This is literally public data. The government paid for it. You earn my tax dollars. It should be open for analysis from any scientist out in the community. And that's just responsible science. Let's just get to the nuts and bolts of it here, because we've got an ongoing measles outbreak. Like, this isn't just happening in a world with no impending public health challenges. Katelyn, you've been tracking this. Can you walk us through where we are right now?
Yeah, the measles cases just keep increasing and increasing. I mean, it is coming in hot this year. And yes, this Texas outbreak has continued to spread. It is now spread to a number of states, including Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Kansas. Huge outbreak in Mexico is also linked to this West Texas outbreak. There's another outbreak happening in Ohio that it doesn't seem to be linked to this Texas outbreak. That's growing, about 10 cases. And we keep seeing sporadic cases throughout the United States from international travel. And interestingly, while this is all happening, Abdul, we also see in Idaho lawmakers introducing a bill called the Medical Freedom Act that would ban schools and businesses from requiring proof of vaccination. And Idaho is already the lowest kindergartner MMR rate in the country, 79%. And it's really hard to make sense of this moment where we're seeing massive outbreaks of measles while at the same time taking apart our public health systems and literally the teams that respond to these outbreaks, as well as our preventative measures. So last week, we also saw West Virginia becoming the first state in the country to ban red dye, right? Fine, ban red dye. Candy is candy without red dye. But not to be outdone, the state of Utah did something else this week.
Yeah, that's right, Katelyn. Utah has become the first state in the country to ban fluoride in drinking water. Yes, ban fluoride, not just like, defluoride, ban it, like on all its local communities. Their governor, Spencer Cox, compared fluoridated water to being medicated by the government. And lawmakers also said that putting fluoride in water was, quote, too expensive, despite the fact that it's just kind of been something that they do, and it's like literally pennies on the dollar. Red dye and fluoride come right out of the MAHA playbook, and fluoride's become a hot topic in state legislatures in large part because of mis and disinformation. The idea of removing fluoride from water failed in New Hampshire, North Dakota, and Tennessee, and lawmakers in Florida, Ohio, Kentucky, and South Carolina are still considering it. Look, NIH has said it's virtually impossible to get a toxic dose from fluoride in drinking water, but the consequence of having unfluoridated drinking water is cavities. And we know that there are huge long-term consequences of having cavities in your teeth. And it's not just your teeth. Think about it. What a cavity is a hole on your enamel where bacteria live. And now you're literally seeding the rest of your body, being the fact that it's literally your mouth, with that bacteria. And that's no good. We know that cavities are associated with higher rates of heart disease and other diseases. So this is a major failure.
Whew, Abdul, this is a lot. It feels like an absolute mess right now. But I think everyone's going to want to stick around for the interview, right? What's up this week?
Yes. Our conversation does bring us a little bit of hope. I had a great conversation with Nat Kendall-Taylor and Julie Sweetland from a consulting group called Frameworks, and I have to put my cards on the table. I am a member of an advisory group to Frameworks on a project that they work on focused on how we frame the discussions that we have that are politically live. And we got into conversations about how we should be talking about issues in this era. It's hard in a moment like this to remember that all that we're seeing from our federal government still sits downstream of the public conversations that we share about who we are and who we want to be. And I thought that Julie and Nat had some really, really great advice about how to have productive conversations with our friends and loved ones and coworkers and family members in a time like this. So I hope that folks will stick around. Katelyn, thank you so much again for a great conversation. America Dissected is brought to you by the Beaumont Foundation. Every day, public health professionals across the country work to promote well-being in their communities, but most people don't understand what they do and why it matters. By building public health literacy in communities, we can improve trust and contribute to better health outcomes. Find new research-tested messaging to communicate about public health, plus useful tips for the real-world situations you face at debeaumont.org. All right, let's get started. Can you introduce yourselves for the tape?
Yeah, this is Nat Kendall-Taylor, CEO at the Frameworks Institute. And I'm Julie Sweetland, sociolinguist and senior advisor at the Frameworks Institute. And I believe that in uncertain times, our communications matters tremendously, and it's one thing we can control.
Well, I really appreciate that because we believe that here too, which is why I'm so grateful we're communicating. I want to step back for a second. Your organization is called Frameworks, which obviously front loads the idea of a frame. Can you give us a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about a frame for a conversation?
Sure. You probably are aware that frames and framing are these kind of ubiquitous concepts. And when things become so ubiquitous, they frequently lose any and all meaning they ever once had. So I love that question and the chance to provide some definition. So when we talk about framing, we're talking about all the choices that we make and how we present ideas, both big and small, the large and obvious choices that we make, the values that we use, fairness, progress, the metaphors that we choose and use to explain how complex things work, but also the smaller choices that we make all the time, the pronouns that we use, whether we talk about they, them, those groups over there, or we and our, the verbs that we choose, how something as small and seemingly insignificant as a verb can be the difference between extending and granting agency and power to whole groups of people or systematically denying it. So framing is all those choices, big and small, and how they affect three things that I think most of the listeners will care about deeply, which is how people think, how people understand the ideas that we are trying to communicate, how people feel emotionally, the way in which people do or don't lean in and engage and become motivated, and then what people do, the actions, decisions, behaviors, degrees of support that people have for solutions that result from the things that we say and the choices that we make in how we say them.
I really appreciate that because you take great care to differentiate between what we think and how we feel and what we do. And it may be that it's just a sign of the times that too often we don't differentiate between those things. And so we just do what we feel. But they are different things, in fact. Can you guys elaborate a little bit more on why that's so important to differentiate between and how the space between those things may create opportunities for, I don't want to say intervention, that may be a more too intense a term, but the opportunity to actually engage in a discourse that might have an effect?
I'll take a first shot, and then Julie, I'd love to hear what you think as well. I'll just say, like, I've been doing this work, Abdul, for a long time, been at Frameworks for a long time, but doing it before that. And I think a lot of the work a lot of the way that we think about communications in this work kind of puts the thinking on a pedestal. Kind of, we're trying to just build understanding, and we frequently ignore the importance of emotion in successful communications. And I think we do that, at our own peril, to our own disadvantage. I mean, there's lots of good work that shows that if you can move and build thinking, but don't move and build the kind of emotional part of it, that those communications tend to be less productive than they could be in achieving the kind of outcomes that you want. So there's the way that we think about it is that kind of the cognitive part of communications and the emotional part are fundamentally intertwined, but that when you do communications research and you think about communications, the most effective messages are those that definitely attend to and try to build the kind of emotional engagement and appeal and pull and grip that is necessary for that understanding work to not only build, but to have the impact in creating the kind of actions and results that we're looking for.
Now, I think that both and, right, at the same time is just right on that point and on many other things facing us as communicators right now. And the distinction between the thinking and the feeling is, I think, one thing that can help us get better talking about science of all things. I know as I work with public health people in public health, other scientists, often people are coming to these fields because of their deeply held values and their emotions, right? They care about the issue, about climate change, about immunization, about injury and violence, whatever the topic may be. But when we communicate, we've got professional habits and norms of just sticking to the facts, right? And talking, right, about, well, the science says. like making appeals to scientific authority as a value, as if we're, if you'll permit me a Star Trek reference, Mr. Spock, and talking about being evidence-based, for instance, as if it's a virtue in and of itself. And for many of us, it is. We want to make sure we're looking to the evidence, but for lots of America, it just isn't. And we frame ourselves into a corner when we sound like we're implying that our logic should be the only answer and that people should accept it without question. And what we can do instead is really point out how we are engaging in social issues because we care about them. We're coming from a place of shared social concern. We're trying to promote well-being. We're trying to respect people's dignity. We're trying to promote fairness. And then we can talk about research as a tool for problem solving and cracking that case on the collective goals. And that's a way that we can bring ourselves as caring people and concerned community members to really rigorous ideas that are about the head and the logic and the content.
It's funny. There's an adage that folks love to use, which is the facts don't care about your feelings. But it turns out that feelings often care a lot about your facts. And I think we get this thing misplaced sometimes. And I come at this from the perspective of a health director and a scientist. And I think the point that you made about science communication is so true. So much of this, the feeling communicated with the facts is, I want you to trust me because I spent a lot of time learning things, rather than I want you to trust me because I care about you. Mm-hmm. And I think it's fascinating how much is framed in what we appeal to when we drive the discussion about issues that are like deep and profound, immediate relevance to the people whom we're talking to, and therefore should command attention in the first place. So bringing it to this area, we talk a lot on this podcast about both the loss of trust in public health and in science, and what it takes to bring it back. And you guys have done a lot of thinking and research about this loss of trust. And I know that your findings are that it's actually a lot broader than just public health and science. Can you share a little bit about maybe the trust deficit that we're experiencing right now and what it means for our public communication?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm sure Julie has things to say as well. But I mean, I really love, we'll go broader than science for sure, Abdul, but I really love that you talked about science. I mean, so much of our thinking about public health is rooted and connected to how we think about science. And kind of going back to that thinking and feeling part, people do feel about science, right? Unfortunately, that feeling is most strongly evoked by people who are pushing back against science. Like talking about how science is either capricious or nefarious elicits strong emotions among a large segment of the population, which directly, works to the detriment of public health efforts. So I think what we have to do is kind of think about how those of us who are communicating and trying to build trust in science can also access different ways that people have of thinking about science, which are equally emotional, right? There is a sense among Americans that science is this awesome process, right? That it allows us to understand things that we previously didn't. And that is, like, you can probably hear it in my voice, like that is an emotional thing that we can evoke. We can appeal to a sense that science helps us solve problems, which is also kind of brings to this conversation an emotional dimension. And so to me, a lot of the thinking about public health is rooted or goes back to our trust or lack of trust in scientific institutions or in science as an institution. But I do think that there are positive and productive ways that people in this country have of thinking about science. I don't think we are very good at intentionally activating or eliciting those ways of thinking. But I think that we can be much better and recognize the importance of emotion in those conversations and not let the people who are pushing back against a science kind of have a monopoly over that emotional dimension.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Leaning into this sense when we can, when appropriate. Science gives us a front row seat to the mysteries of the universe, right? It unlocks possibilities we couldn't imagine. All of that, Nat, totally agree. I think another thing about reclaiming a persona, a stance of being trustworthy is part of, right, rebuilding trust. And to the extent that we're all like just staying stuck in the frames that we know have gotten us into a fraught and stuck conversation, we're not being trustworthy because we're not listening and we're not being responsive, right? And so I like to think about one way to build trust is looking for side doors into conversations. Like when a public issue is polarized and the getting into the conversation feels like getting into a boxing ring, right? That's when we need to think, I need to find a side door into this conversation, meaning not always hitting people head on with the main argument, looking for a different way to connect with them that might actually make them more open to your main point. So, instead of showing up at the front door and yelling, get vaccinated, right? We're looking for another way into the conversation, and not because we're trying to trick anyone or be, manipulative, but because we want to find a way to connect on something people already care about. So that's what I mean by a side door, which is simple. The hard part speaks to our research. It's finding which side door is the right one, which fresh angle will resonate broadly. And so that's where I think the role of research like ours and lots of other folks do good work in this field. That's where the role of evidence comes in. So like in studies that we did in frameworks in partnership with the American Academy of Pediatrics, we found that the conversational doors that the field has been using for years just weren't working. Saying vaccines are safe and effective, same as saying nothing. It's having no effect. Sad, scary stories of sick kids. Well, it risks sounding like emotional manipulation to folks who are hesitant or lack vaccine confidence. And both of those frames, both of those front doors were reminding people of this manufactured controversy, that there's a lot of risk that comes with vaccines. So the side door we found worked was talking more about the immediate rewards of immunization, right? Widespread immunization against contagious illnesses. So keeping kids healthy means keeping kids doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? At that age, learning to walk and talk, or learning to read, or learning to manage the stress of the middle school dance, whatever that is. But if we're keeping schools safe and healthy places and their immune systems are ready to jump into action, that means the kid and the immune system can do its thing. That means the kids can do theirs. So like that very real world scenario we found is a place to build that common ground, and doing that, finding that common ground is, I think, part of rebuilding trust.
America Dissected is brought to you by Ground News. I spend a lot of time reading news, and if you're listening to this pod, I'm rather sure that you do too. As the news ecosystem has exploded with all kinds of news sites and aggregators and newsletters popping up, it's kind of hard to get a sense of what you're reading and whether or not the author or publication has an agenda. That means that it's really hard to trust anything you read at all. Too often, folks are writing to others in their own ideological bubble, and you can end up getting captured by this algo or that one, without having a sense of what the broader lay of the land looks like, or being exposed to other perspectives you might not be getting. Thankfully, there's a way to escape these echo chambers of ideological reinforcement, a platform that helps you see every side of every news story. It's called Ground News. Ground News is a platform that makes it easy to compare news sources, read between the lines of media bias, and break free from algorithms. Ground News puts you in a position to choose and compare the news you want to read while giving you a peek into what's being reported on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Let me give you a sense of how we use it. With all the news coming out of this White House, it's worth understanding both what folks who may think like you are hearing and what folks who may not are too. I don't ever want to miss my blind spots. And that's why I love Ground News' blind spot feature, which specifically compares headlines across the same issues. For me, it's critical to gather all these perspectives as we prep for the podcast, making sure we can fully articulate the perspectives we bring within the context of everything that's being said. That blind spots feature is just one of the really valuable resources that Ground News offers. With Ground News, you can get details about the source of your information, including if the news outlet has a political bent, how reliable the reporting is, and who owns them, empowering you to compare how different news sources from around the world cover the same story. With over 9,500 five-star reviews of their app and website, Ground News is the #1 platform to discover how any news story is being covered, giving every perspective all in one place. Expand your view of the news. Sign up for your Ground News account today and get access to the mobile app, website, browser extension, and exclusive newsletters so you can have a well-rounded view of the world, think critically about what you read, and find common ground between perspectives. Go to groundnews.com/AD today to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan and get access to all of their news analysis features. That's groundnews.com/AD for 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan for a limited time only. groundnews.com/AD. You know, what's interesting to me is that I spent a lot of time talking to other scientists and health professionals. And if you say the word science to me, the overwhelming emotion that I have is delight. And I can think about the first time I felt like I could wrap my mind around a scientific concept and it helped to predict things that then happened in the world. And that to me is delightful. And it's interesting because almost every scientist I know has the same feeling, this like warm, fuzzy feeling when they think about science. And I'm like, I don't know where in grad school or wherever we get told that we're not allowed to bring that to the conversations we have with the public about science. And we get told that the way to lead is with our credentialing and in this sterile, unfun, nothing but the facts approach, which literally creates a vacuum of emotion, to your point, Nat, and then allows for a different emotion set to take in. And, you know, it's interesting because science is actually transacted as a set of stories. We don't think about it that way, but every scientific paper is a story. I had this thought, and then I wondered if that thought was real, and then I designed this experiment, and this is what I saw, and this is what it made me think. Like, that's how science is transacted. It's literally a story. And we forget how to tell that story because we just then cite the emergent statistics that come out of things. And we forget to lead that way. And to your point about side doors, Julie, I really appreciated that because, you know, it's funny when I'm sort of out in the world as a director of health for a county and a health official, obviously I have an official role and some level of authority. But the question that most people ask me is, you got young kids, right? Yes, I do. So what did you do for your kids? Right? So it's not me, health official, it's me, dad, right? And as a dad, what did you do? Because most people aren't health officials, but a lot of people are dads and moms. And I think we lose the opportunity to find, to your point, that common ground. One of the aspects of your work that I find really important is about this concept of a system, right? And the idea that the system around us, which is those pieces of things that we can't necessarily account for or control, that system has been rigged. Right? Which is a really, really powerful frame because then it opens up the question of for what and by whom, right? And I think there's some really interesting ways that gets played with. And we're seeing that in particular, you know, to do some pretty terrible rigging, I would argue at the federal level by DOGE and Musk. You guys have done some thinking about this and actually wrote about how Musk is leveraging the idea of the system being rigged to, in fact, rig the system. Can you share a little bit more about why that is such a powerful frame and about how it's getting used right now?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk a lot about system as rigged thinking. It is, it has emerged as an incredibly powerful mindset in the work that we've been doing, Abdul. So we've been monitoring, tracking mindsets, kind of deep, implicit, shared understandings that people use to make sense of complex social issues in a project called the Culture Change Project since May 2020. And I would say like the most remarkable finding from that project is the degree to which we have seen the strength of system as rigged thinking increase. And when I say strength, I mean both the way in which this mindset is at the front of people's thinking has increased, right? It is the dominant way that people make sense of social issues in today's world. And also its scope. So when we started the work, system as rigged thinking was kind of restricted to people's thinking about the political or the economic system. But we have seen that dramatically expand, and people evoke system as rigged thinking to talk about health or education or reproductive rights or kind of whatever the issue that you put in front of them. The explanation for the problem is that the system is rigged. And there is It's a fairly simple script as a mindset, and it goes something like this. There are a few people in power who have control over the system. They use that power to manipulate it for their advantage and to the disadvantage of everybody else. That's the script. Now, here is the problem. You can probably hear in that script, it is incredibly vague and full of holes. You can fill that mindset in a way that leads to replacement theory, that leads to xenophobia, reactionary thinking, and racism. You can fill that same mindset in a way that leads to a really kind of progressive critique of the concentration of power, something that looks like kind of, Occupy or 98%, whatever it is. So you can, that same mindset, when filled in different ways, leads to dramatically different perspectives. So our question for the last 2 years has been, how do we fill it in a way that consistently leads to that more productive critique of how systems are being manipulated to advance inequities and concentrate power in unproductive ways. And I won't get into this right now unless you're interested, we've found that there are some ways of doing that. Like there are some ways of telling these system is rigged stories that consistently avoid the kind of xenophobia and racist tendencies that narrative can have, and direct it in like with some pretty good integrity. And by integrity, I mean kind of resistance to being co-opted in these more productive directions that can help people think about what is going on in our country right now, and importantly, what needs to happen, right? I think that is a key part of the narrative. So system is rigged thinking is, we've come to the perspective like it is here to stay, and if we are not thinking about how to effectively engage that, to mobilize and motivate the kind of actions and solutions that we're interested in, we are seeding this incredibly, potentially like the most powerful cultural narrative of our time, right? And so we've come to the conclusion that moving away and avoiding it is really not an option.
Yeah, use it or lose it. And by it, I mean democracy. So I think it's one that we've all got to get really fluent in using effectively, really fast, and doing that in ways that, again, like are not, I'm not talking about appeasing anyone, but I do think it's important that we're careful not to continue to fuel polarization. And so working on doing that, talking about the system is rigged in ways that can reach the persuadable middle of America, which is vaster and more persuadable than our political discourse might lead us to believe.
Yeah, and I should mention I know this work because I sit on the advisory board with you all and thinking about specifically how to engage with this narrative that's so dominant through the Culture Change Project. And we're in this moment where I think a lot of us who see value in a lot of the government infrastructure, even if at times it could be so much more efficient and so much more effective, we see value in those institutions. And when folks who have been rigging the system for a long time, like billionaires who have literally taken handouts from the government for years to build their companies, are actually rigging the system, they're very good at weaponizing that narrative. And you're seeing it seep in across all the different facets of our government right now under this administration. In one particular space, the one we pay attention to on the show, you think about Health and Human Services. We've got a secretary who literally has made a name for himself as being the system is rigged guy around vaccines in the context of a measles outbreak that is infected hundreds of people now and literally crossed state borders and international lines. And he's leveraging his position to drive vaccine hesitancy in the way that he continues to emphasize this idea that because these vaccines were vetted by a system you can't trust, that you should be careful and you should make decisions for yourself. Meanwhile, a lot of us on the other side are defending a system, right, that hasn't been perfect, but also are trying to defend it from being destroyed, which puts us very much on the wrong side of that narrative. And so I want to ask you, as we try and engage with this moment, how do we counter this when they've so very clearly articulated themselves on the side of this? How would you recommend engaging with this frame in a way that's a little bit more productive when in fact we are asking people to do the thing that, millions of dollars and millions of hours of time have spent to produce these like pretty miraculous things of these vaccines, and is way easier to demagogue them than it is to get people to take them. So what's your recommendation to all of us who are trying to take this issue on?
Yeah, I think one thing we can try is to talk about the various checks and balances, the stops along the way to a vaccine recommendation as protections we've put in place so that, right, the system is safe and fair and accessible to everyone and not rigged. I thought a little bit more about this on Medicaid than vaccination. So talking about Medicaid as a way we actually tried to unrig the system, Medicaid expansion in particular, right? It's the way we offer public health insurance when people can't get private insurance from an employer, either because they're unable to work due to disability or illness, or because they're actually working 3 jobs and those those companies are not giving health benefits. And so we came together with our collective power to give more Americans access to coverage. And 8 of 10 people enrolled in Medicaid rate it highly. And of course, there's always room to improve any system, but we can't improve a system that doesn't exist. And we can't trust the private markets, right, to make sure we all get taken care of. And so, cutting or ending Medicaid would be knocking down, right, one of those load-bearing beams in the foundation of our community health and a structure we actually built to protect people, right, from an unfair, privatized, profit-based system. So that's one example I think that we can try. We'll be going, to test that specific work on health pretty soon. So stay tuned. But engaging with that narrative, I think not just pointing out billionaire villains. The research we've got on that is interesting. It can do some good things. It can also keep the story pretty narrow on personal individuals and obscure the bigger view of what's happening. But those are some thoughts.
America Dissected is brought to you by Bull and Branch. I don't know about you, but after a long Michigan winter, spring feels, well, like a real new beginning. And that's why Sarah and I are always looking for opportunities for our spring refresh. And for us, that starts with bedding. That's right, the single place where we spend more time than any other place. That's why we turn to Bull and Branch's signature sheets. Bull and Branch signature sheets are the perfect place to start. Made with the finest 100% organic cotton, these sheets feel buttery to the touch, breathable to sleep in, and get softer with every wash. They're the perfect foundation for your best sleep this season, and you can easily add Bull and Branch's bed blankets, duvets, and quilts, all made with airy and breathable designs. As we put away our jackets and our boots for the season, we pull out the sheets that are perfect for warmer days and nights. Bull and Branch products are made different so you can sleep better at night. Woven with the finest 100% organic cotton on earth, crafted by artisans who earn the pay and respect they deserve, the signature hemmed sheet sets feature designs and colors for every bedroom style and mattress size. These all-season sheets have a breathable, unmatched softness to start and get softer with every single wash. They are the perfect foundation for Bull and Branch's airy bed blankets, cloud-like duvets, and so much more. They also have a 30-night worry-free guarantee, so you can try Bull and Branch sheets for an entire month. Seriously, you can wash, style, and feel the difference for yourself, risk-free. If they don't change the way you sleep, you can send them back for a full refund. Upgrade your sleep during Bull and Branch's annual spring event. For a limited time, get 20% off at bullandbranch.com/AD. That's Bull and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/AD to take 20% off site-wide for a limited time. Exclusions apply. See site for details. One of the things that's really interesting to me about public health is that generally we have embraced our role as the system to much damage. And because if you go back to the big fights that public health has taken on, we were always the folks trying to expose the system as being rigged. So like go to the swill milk epidemic of the early 1900s, right? Late 1800s, early 1900s. And our whole point was, hey, the system is rigged. They're not feeding you milk. They're literally feeding you chemicals as milk. Or you can fast forward and and go to the huge fight that public health took on against big tobacco. Hey, they're selling you these things, telling you that these are good for you, and that doctors smoke this, but doctors actually know that this is really harmful, and we're going to take down one of the biggest industries in America because they're hurting you. And I worry that we as a sector, as a group, have gotten comfortable as institutionalists and forgotten that our job is to pick big fights with the folks that are hurting people. So I've been calling for a minute now for a big fight with big tech, right? That is a really powerful institution that is literally fracking our minds for our attention, taking us away from the people we love most, away from our communities and away from ourselves. And this is a fight that we should take on because they're trying to rig the system against us. And the problem is that we've almost lost that will because we're so focused on the small marginalia that we've been told is our actual approach. Similarly with big healthcare, right? Healthcare was never supposed to be about padding the pockets of huge corporations. It was always supposed to be about keeping you healthy when you got sick. And now, right, you get your pay garnished and then have to pay $4,000 to get the healthcare you thought you already paid for because you got sick. Like, these are fights we should pick. And I wonder, as you sort of think about the melding of attention and policy in the way that politics naturally has done, but like done in real time now, given how fast information moves. I'm wondering what your recommendations might be to our field as we think about trying to leverage this moment and the conversation that's being had about us around where to go from here as a strategy.
It's a great question. It's a huge question. It's a hard question. Next question is kind of what I want to say. But I mean, I think we do know. I think we have some ideas about how to do that, Abdul. And I just want to take a step back and say, like, there is a tension and a paradox in what you're saying. It's like, how do you critique systems but have those same systems be part of the solution? Like, and it's bigger than public health, Abdul. It's like, I would say it's like the progressive paradox. Like, how do you be critical of the thing that's an essential part of moving forward and solving problems? And I think there's like some steps to think about. And I think the first is to be really clear about what we need from these systems. Like, what do people need from these systems? What do they do? What unique role do these systems play that other systems that might fill in for them can't do? Right? Why are these things essential? And then move pretty quickly to an explanation of how weakening them or eradicating them creates problems, right? It means that they can't do the things that we need them to do for us, and that there are problems that we experience as a result. I do think it is important in these stories that we tell and these narratives that we advance, that there is some recognition that these systems are not working as they need to be working. And I think without that acknowledgement, we turn off and we turn away a lot of people. I do think it's possible to acknowledge the fact that the systems matter and are an important part of the solution, yet have not been working in the way that we need them to work. And then to follow that with some really concrete explanation and particularly examples of how they need to change to do their work for us better. And the more we can get specific and provide examples, whether they're historical or from other issues, that illustrate that is possible, combats one of the biggest backfire effects when we talk about systems, is that people may understand a problem as a system, but as soon as they do, their understandings of systems as opaque and intractable make them wildly and completely fatalistic. So you may have put a problem in a system, but you've made it totally out of reach and people see it as something you can't address. And the antidote for that is examples that show efficacy, that we can make changes. Here's what they look like. Here's some places where they've happened. And here's what happens as a result when we do the things that we know we need to do.
Yes, yes, yes to all of that, Nat. And you mentioned the kind of the core progressive paradox. I like to remind people that we have a core progressive narrative that's available to us, which is that times and conditions have changed. We need to change to solve this new problem, to address this new reality. And that kind of narrative arc or that kind of theme can help us resolve that system as problem, but also system as part of the solution.
Mm.
And Abdul, right where you started your analysis, hey, we've been doing this for a long time, from swill milk to tobacco. All of those, right? That was a big mindset, a core mindset that public health and others were trying to build, which is that there are defective products out there, and government coming together is one of the ways to protect us as citizens from those defective products. That has been a narrative and a mindset that we've built over time, and we can keep leveraging that to deal with new challenges. But deeper than that, when we can think about those enduring mindsets, those assumptions that have been around again and again, and kind of the big rocks in our discourse that we need to move, that kind of thinking is also how to get out of a short-term, immediate react, not respond kind of mode, which we're susceptible to when it seems like everything's on fire.
I really appreciate that, and it's helpful to think a little bit about the nuances of how we frame around this system or these systems. Thinking about the sizes of systems, about time change, and how it should reorient our systems. I want to thank you all for the time that you put into helping us think through this, and for sharing your insights. Where can people go to learn more about your research and get involved?
So all of our research is free and publicly available on our website, frameworksinstitute.org. That's the good news. And the bad news is that all of our research is free and publicly available on our website. So it takes a little while to get through and find it, but it is all there. And the hope is that there's some resources that can be useful to your listeners. Abdul, it's been great talking with you.
Well, maybe I'll put a plug in for the Cliff Notes versions that are you can find in our social media accounts on Instagram and on YouTube, where we try to create shorter and more digestible formats of the very rigorous, very smart research that my colleagues here do. But yeah, we're easy to find and standing by to support folks doing good work in communications.
Well, we appreciate you joining us here today. Our guests today were Nat Kendall-Taylor and Julie Sweetland of the Frameworks Institute. We really appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Abdul.
That's it for today. You can find more content at our website, incisionmedia.co, and check out our shop at store.americadissected.com for our new America Dissected merch, including our Make America Scientific Again dad caps. If you have guest recommendations for the show, send us an email at info@incisionmedia.com. You can follow or subscribe to America Dissected on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube at America Dissected. And you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and yes, X at Abdul no dash. And make sure to subscribe to Katelyn's amazing newsletter, Your Local Epidemiologist, which breaks down the latest scientific evidence for over 300,000 readers. Search for Your Local Epidemiologist on Substack. Links to all our sponsors are available in the show notes. I really do hope that you'll check them out and show them some love. They make the show possible every single week. Finally, on your way out, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, drop us a like or a comment. Word of mouth still does go a long way. So if you know someone who might really like to keep up with everything that's happening in the world of health, please do let them know. America Dissected is a product of Incision Media. Our co-host is Dr. Katelyn Jetelina. Our producer is Andy Gardner-Bernstein. Video and audio editing by Nadine Melkonian. Our theme song is by Taka Sazawa and Alex Uguera. Sales and marketing by Joel Fowler and Nick Freeman at Big Little Media. Our executive producers are Tara Knight and me, Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed, your host. Thanks for listening. This show is for general information and entertainment purposes only. It's not intended to provide specific healthcare or medical advice and should not be construed as providing healthcare or medical advice. Please consult your physician with any questions related to your own health. The views expressed in this podcast reflect those of the hosts and their guests and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Wayne County, Michigan, or its Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services.